We all know that Berserk has an impressive lore and is a manga that will stand the test of time. And not only that, it has influenced games, movies, manga, and other anime content. And in this video, we'll look at all the things that Berserk has inspired over the years. But before that, a quick message from our sponsor. So the first one we got up on the docket is Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a 2011 action role-playing game developed by From Software and published by Namco Bandai Games. Among reputable journalists, magazines, and the general fandom, it is considered one of the greatest games ever produced. The game's difficulty is one of its hallmarks, with some remarking, "It's the hardest game I've ever played in my life." Through its minimalistic storytelling, it's largely up to the player to interpret the significance and symbolism of key historical events. This harkens to the Berserk tale, where key events and people are left ambiguous, without much explanation on Mira's part. In addition, Dark Souls has other references to the aforementioned dark fantasy novel in more direct ways. Witch Beatrice of Dark Souls has green hair, a purple cloak, and holds a staff, much like Shirka from Berserk. And in fact, there is even a model of Beatrice as a child that is contained within the Dark Souls game files that resembles Shirka's appearance, since both are children-like in their appearance. When we look at these pictures, the eye orbs bear a distinct resemblance to the Baelits. The Taurus demon in Dark Souls, according to the Dark Souls wiki, is a Minotaur-esque demon found on top of the narrow castle wall in the Undead Burg. And I'll be damned if this is not a spitting image of Nosferatu Zod. Dark Souls, the man-serpent in Sen's Fortress, is an iconic villain, much like the Snake Baron is an iconic villain for the Berserk canon, and they look remarkably similar to each other. Now in Dark Souls, there is the Dark Sign, which signifies an accursed undead. Those branded with it are reborn after death, but will one day lose their mind and go hollow. Now this harkens to the Eclipse of the Berserk, in which unfortunate individuals are marked for death by a ritualistic sacrifice, and henceforth branded with the brand of sacrifice. Now one of the more interesting references is Andrea of Astora and Godo, both of whom are blacksmiths that aid the main character in their quest. Speaking of main characters, Guts seems to have been the inspiration behind Artorias, the Abyss Walker. In fact, Elizabeth of Dark Souls once said of Artorias, "Without a doubt, he will be swallowed by the abyss, overcome by its utter blackness." Now Guts often struggles against the Berserker armor and being consumed by the blackness of his soul. In addition, Artorias has a crippled arm, a wolf companion, possesses a great sword, and lost his sanity. Which sounds remarkably similar to Guts. He lost his arm in the Eclipse, he has a beast of darkness that looks like a dog/wolf, he has a huge sword, and at many times in the manga, you could argue that he lost his sanity. Now both fight in a ferocious manner, and have similar poses in their concept art. I mean, if you just look at this picture, it's pretty damn obvious. Now moving on, we have Elden Ring, which is not a sequel to the Dark Souls tale, but was directed by the same man, Hidetaka Miyazaki. Now one of the more heart-wrenching moments is when you go to a field with swords on it. And in the field, you see many swords, and in the middle is a giant sword. Now this harkens to the moment in Berserk when Guts and Griffith went up to the Sword of Hills that Ricker created for the old Band of the Hawk that died at the Eclipse. And for Elden Ring, the giant sword is supposed to be like a memorial for Kentaro Miura, since many of you already know, but if you don't, Kentaro Miura was the mangaka for Berserk, and he tragically passed away last May. So just a very beautiful moment there. I absolutely love that. Now at the beginning of Elden Ring, players can choose a prisoner class character that looks similar to Griffith when he was being tortured in the Tower of Rebirth. You'll notice that the helmet on top of the head looks remarkably similar. Now, like the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring tells much of its lore through flavor text. And one interesting text of note goes as follows. A coarse iron lump of an ultra-great sword mows down foes by utilizing its incredible weight. Though handling it likely requires the wielder to have surpassed the realm of the merely human. It is precisely for this reason that the weapon is used to slaughter even inhuman foes. Now this harkens to the description of the Dragon Slayer, which is characterized as being too big to be called a sword and a heap of raw iron. Now Blacksmith Hugh, much like Andre from Dark Souls, resembles Godo. And finally, we have a nice little picture here with visual references to Farnese's armor, Guts' pose again, and the World Spiral Tree. And then the last reference I want to point out for Elden Ring is Starscourge Rodin. Now Starscourge Rodin is a boss in Elden Ring, and he was once known as the famed Red Lion. General Rodin has been eaten away by the Scarlet Rot, causing him to devour the bodies of friend and foe, howling at the sky. Despite his condition, he is still a ferocious warrior, utilizing his brute strength and gravity magic to fend off attackers. You would have the honor of facing off against Starscourge and putting him out of his misery. Now, as I was looking across Reddit forums and kind of analyzing the picture for myself, Starscourge Rodin almost looks a little bit like Zod or even Geiseric. Now, there's a little bit of interesting information regarding this, because I posted a theory video about who I think King Geiseric was. Besides that, it is interesting to note that Rodin is known as the Red Lion, and in Berserk, Sonya called Zod the Black Lion. And when he transforms into his apostle form, although it is a minotaur, he does have cat-like features. And then of course the red is a huge coincidence as well, so possibly a connection. Alright, so next up we got Bloodborne. Now in Bloodborne, there are celestial children, and they are slug-like creatures with no visible eyes, and growths covering their faces. This resembles the demon child from Berserk, who has one of its eyes covered and has a deformed body. There's a character known as Ludwig, and he mutated into a grotesque horse in the Bloodborne series. And this harkens to the grotesque rape horse of Berserk, both of whom are iconic characters for their respective series. The laborious wheel is inspired by the wheel Mosgus used to torture heretics. Now the watchdog of the Old Lords is one of the bosses found in the Chalice dungeons, and it looks remarkably similar to Guts' Beast of Darkness. In addition, Sylvan's Beast from Dark Souls 3 also bears a distinct resemblance to the two. Then there's the Hunter's Mark of Bloodborne that looks remarkably similar to the Brand of Sacrifice of Berserk. The demon messengers of Bloodborne look a lot like the demon messengers that visited Griffith when he was in the Tower of Rebirth. There are possessed dogs as well. And then finally we have Dark Wraith, which looks an awful lot like the Skull Knight, although that is a Dark Souls 2 reference. Sorry, I got that a little bit out of order. But I believe that ends the Miyazaki references to Berserk. There are others out there, but I tried to pick the ones that were the most popular. Alright, so on to our next game, and this one is going to be Final Fantasy Tactics, which was released in Japan in June of 1997. The first similarity comes from the Zodiac Stones, which grant demonhood to people who possess them, much like the Baelits. Final Fantasy Tactics centers around the relationship between Ramza, the noble of the Belov family, and Delita, a commoner taken into the family's house. Delita seems to parallel Griffith with his humble birth, grand aspirations of becoming a king, and willingness to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. Now this last bit of information is a bit of a stretch, but Belias, who refers to himself as the devil, bears a resemblance to Nosferatu Zod. He also has the ability to exist as a human or transform into his demon form. In addition to Final Fantasy Tactics, many other Final Fantasy games have featured the Buster Sword, which takes inspiration from the Dragon Slayer. Now this next reference may seem a bit unlikely, but this one comes from American cinema, and I'm talking about none other than Marvel's Avengers: Infinity War. Now the scene I'm talking about in particular is the one in which Thanos sits in a pool of water while holding the Soul Stone, and it looks eerily reminiscent of the beginnings of the Eclipse, with Griffith sitting in the water with the Baelit. Aside from the visual similarity, it shares thematic elements as well. For example, Thanos sacrificed Gamora, that which he loved the most, to attain immense destructive power. Likewise, Griffith sacrificed the Band of the Hawk to attain his demon form and immense power. Moving on to anime and manga, the Claymore series has a similar vibe to the Berserk canon. Although it predominantly features women, both are dark fantasies that prominently feature large swords and grotesque monsters. The Yoma monsters of Claymore share qualities with the Apostles of Berserk, and both have very dark tones and feature a lot of death. The next two are Hellsing Ultimate and Attack on Titan. Both these series feature the stuff of nightmares, and make gore and brutality its own art form, something Mira had done for 30 years. Despite all three series featuring abject horror and depravity, there's always a glimmer of hope that keeps the main characters going on their path towards release. And then the final offering I have for you guys today is an anime that was released in October of 2003, Gungrave. Despite the apparent differences on the surface, with Berserk featuring a medieval backdrop and Gungrave centering around modern-day gang violence, they both feature two characters who form a pivotal bond with one another. But through a series of events, Griffith betrays Guts, and Harry betrays Brandon. And in both anime series, the first episode starts at the point where the betrayal has already happened, and then afterwards, on episode 2, we go back in time and find out how they got to that point. Both series also feature a lot of action, a lot of gore, and a lot of heartbreak. But that's it, guys. That's all the references that I could come up with. I'm sure there are many others out there that I didn't think of, and if you want to, please put those in the comments. Tell me what you think of the video, subscribe, like if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.